All right, are we ready? It's a really big audience. Here we go. All right. Nope, it's not October 20th. It is November 17th. Meeting of the Zoning Advisory Committee is called to order at 5:30.
All right, let's do some roll call. Shannon Coley.
Here.
Polly Boardman.
Here.
Kristen DeHaan.
Here.
Tyler Rogers. Here. Christine Hull.
Here, present.
Christy Essa. Absent. Natalie Geisels. Absent. Adriana Publico. Absent. Lauren Rushing. Absent. Amy Howe.
Here.
Darren Fleck.
Here.
Brooke Snyder.
Here.
That's more than half. It's quorum.
Okay, we're at 8. We're good. All right, we've hit quorum. Good job. Thank you, everybody. All right, moving on. Approval of the minutes of September 15th of the Zoning Advisory Committee. I do believe we have one change. Darren?
I just wanted to add at the end, we were talking about those variances, and I was hoping after Lauren, Ms. Ford addressed me at the very end that I had brought up that I was more interested in variance anomalies that might be at certain schools when we look at them. And I had brought up, for example, 145 variances at Mendive, which equals about 10% of the population. And if that could be something that we were made aware of if there are any other places like that when we look at zoning. And that's it. Thank you.
So I think we could I think that went on the top of page 8 at the end of Lauren's comment and before mine. Do we have any other changes? Are you good? Yeah. Okay. All right. Motion to approve with changes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of September 15th, 2022 with the modifications just discussed.
Polly Boardman, second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Motion passes. Minutes are approved with the amendment. All right. Item 2.02, information and discussion regarding proposed enrollment zone adjustments for the 24-25 school year, potentially impacting the following schools: Desert Heights Elementary School, Lemon Valley Elementary School, Alice Smith Elementary School, and Stead Elementary School. This item is for information and discussion only. Adam.
Okay, good afternoon. For the record, for the minutes, my name is Adam Searcy. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the school district. These schools in this area were previewed at the September meeting. We didn't get a chance to go through them in October, and here we are in November. Appreciate everybody being here tonight. It has been a few minutes, but this is sort of your orientation slide. So just to get your bearings, you've got all your schools labeled up here, but as the agenda item referred to, Stead Elementary, Desert Heights, Lemon Valley, Alice Smith. Always for the record, we've got our existing elementary school boundary lines outlined in blue, existing middle school boundary lines delineated with the colors. So all of this beige is O'Brien Middle School. And then your gold line represents your high school boundary line. This is between North Valleys and Hug. This red star is a 10-acre property that the school district owns, on which we intend to build a new elementary school at some point as needed in the future. You can also see this is 395. A major geographic boundary. You can see Lemon Valley's enrollment zone spans from both sides of 395, as well as Alice Smith's also picks up students on both sides of the freeway. Of course, there's geography out there. You've got Lemon Drive, Military Drive, Stead Boulevard, also major geographic features that are going to influence our conversations tonight. Okay, everybody got their bearings? Lots of construction going on up there. It's a lot going on. Speaking of a lot going on, we've done some work up here in the recent past, and I think it's helpful to the public, at least, to go through this in a little bit of detail, in part because it can seem like, gosh, aren't we too frequently rezoning this community? And that's something that we're very conscious of, to the disruption and to avoid that. So a lot of words here, but basically these first two items were related to the opening of Michael Inskeep up in Cold Springs. So we spent some time pre-pandemic and just in 2020 looking at ways to bring those sixth graders back up, or pardon me, bring the fifth graders back down into Silver Lake. And so that did impact areas that are associated with Desert Skies or Desert Heights Elementary and Stead Elementary. I think it's the main takeaway there is that there's no double impacts. None of the areas that will be discussed tonight were actually affected by these rezones. But I can appreciate how, the public might feel like I'm being rezoned frequently. We're talking about a different area associated with these schools. So that all went into effect in the 21-22 school year. Also in this time, we were up in Panther Valley, and Alice Smith Elementary School was affected as some of those students were rezoned into Bennett and Desert Skies effective this school year. Again, nothing for discussion tonight includes those areas. So while we have been making having a lot of zoning discussions in this area, we're very mindful of the impacts and not to duplicate those. I think, in reality, you'll find this as not a symptom of, but a necessary action in an area of this dynamic of growth. It's just a lot of change going on in that area. So let's just recap. This is also more of an orientation slide. These are the existing enrollments and capacity utilizations for the 4 elementary schools. You can see kind of the graphical representation of basically the imbalanced enrollment distribution, and that's kind of what we're going to try to improve through this work. And then we also noted the age or the opening date of those schools we think is noteworthy, as sometimes our older schools are somewhat less well equipped to accommodate greater utilization levels. So again, that's just the state of affairs. This is slide 6 is a snapshot of the current variance percentages across these 4 schools. So, it is a good question that often comes up. Why is this school so populated? Are there a number of students attending who, are not technically zoned for that school? So we teased out the data on these 4 schools in particular and compared them kind of to the district-wide average. And you can see that all of them are relatively within that range. Desert Heights a little bit above, but the other 3 actually all below the district average of invariances. Students enrolled at that school who are not zoned for that school. Another topic that was requested, or an important variable associated with kind of the use and the population of schools, are the special programs that are housed and use space in those schools. And so these are known and tracked by our team and our staff and are taken into consideration when we estimate the capacity of these schools. And it does change from year to year as programs, ebb and flow in their sort of participation and need, but you can see multiple special ed programs and other programs, pre-K programs at all of these schools, but in particular Desert Heights. They also have a non-school district sponsored Head Start program. They kind of have their own portable. It's a great thing actually, but not inside the school, so it's not shown on here. All right, so this is our last sort of orientation slide. Here are the existing enrollments and utilization percentages on that left-hand column as of October, but these are our projections. I think the takeaway from this slide is really just the ongoing anticipated levels of growth. It doesn't take a lot of rigorous analysis to see the construction out there and know that more is planned. This is our best projection of what that growth will mean is in terms of enrollment. You can see all of those schools with moderate to significant growth forecasted. Really what we're trying to do, I mentioned earlier, we've got an elementary school parcel purchased and planned for in that area, and we anticipate the need for an additional school facility, you know, perhaps in this 10-year horizon or slightly further out. But what you can see from this is that there is a immediate need or issue with regards to overcrowding, and we think a potential solution, and one that will last for, you know, more than 5 years. Could provide relief that would not have to be rezoned again with the opening of a new school inside of that 5-year window. Okay, so slide 9, we can start talking about some new content. We've tried to break this up into 4 areas, and as we sometimes do, look at different combinations of rezoning options using these areas. Again, as always, looking at major geographic boundaries, subdivision, borders, and other features to try to derive these logical areas for rezoning consideration. We also noted the total number of existing elementary school students residing in those areas. That's not to say that's the projected population. You'll see some variations on the future year slides, but today that's how many students live in those areas and which elementary schools they currently attend. So we'll go through A, B, C, and D and various combinations over these next couple of slides. Any questions so far? This is also an old standby. This is an excerpt or sort of a summary from our primary guidance document, our administrative regulation 7107. In part forms this committee and largely informs and guides it, states to the public kind of our primary tenets. But I'll let you guys read the details. It talks about small neighborhood units. It talks about the closest school to the extent possible, compact, non-irregular enrollment zones, enrollment levels that allow for growth and anticipate changes to the best of our ability. Number 5, comply with feeder patterns. We talk about that a lot, trying to ensure that the same elementary school students stay together whenever possible, and to also consider transportation when making these choices. So, you know, this is obviously an excerpt and we're paraphrasing here, but sometimes when we get into tough choices and it's not always a clear-cut option, going back to some of these principles has been centering for us in the committee as the years have gone by. Okay, so
Adam, I do have one question, if I may.
yes, please.
The Desert Heights utilization seems like particularly low from the numbers I'm sort of used to seeing. Is there a reason that it is indeed like half of its capacity?
You know, I think it's primarily a function of the student age population in that community. It's been relatively underutilized for as long as I've, you know, been working for the school district. As such, you can see it's been used as a home for a lot more of these special programs, just sort of by virtue of its space availability. There's also a charter school right down the street. Sierra Nevada Academy, I forget what it's called, SNACS is the acronym, right? They pull a large number of students who are zoned for Desert Heights attend that charter school. You know, it's not a huge number, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, but, you know, 50 or 100 kids, that type of impact all contributes to the utilization numbers you see. And that's, you know, sort of the opportunity that we're going to talk about here tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, so option one looks at, you can see the arrow, but just to reorient everybody, this is what we called before Area B, which is currently zoned for Lemon Valley Elementary School. As you recall, one of the most overcrowded school on the list, and pointing up towards Desert Heights as to imply option one is suggesting rezoning Area B from Lemon Valley to Desert Heights. Okay, so slide 12 shows on the bottom slide the impact data associated with option one. So moving that Area B and all of its approximately 49 elementary school students out of Lemon Valley into Desert Heights, you can see the associated decrease and increase in the bottom table for option one, perhaps not providing quite as much relief to Lemon Valley as we'd maybe prefer, but Desert Heights easily able to absorb those 50 or so students. I should point out that this item is agendized, anticipating that any proposed enrollment changes or boundary changes would go into effect the 24-25 school year. That's certainly up for input by the committee as well, but you'll see on these impact tables that vertical red line is intended to reflect that sort of date of change. So you can see those numbers for Desert Heights moving up by 50 or so students. That's when it goes into effect 24-25 school year. And again, that's just currently staff proposal. Okay, any questions on option one? Option two is building on option one, taking this Area B that we just talked about, moving it from Lemon Valley to Desert Heights. But as we just saw, that alone maybe doesn't relieve Lemon Valley Elementary School quite as much as we'd like. So we went ahead and looked at also moving Area D from Lemon Valley to Alice Smith. So that would be all of Area D. It's only about 35 students today on the opposite side of 395 from Alice Smith. They currently cross 395 or are bused up to Lemon Valley and would be bused to Alice Smith, an additional 35 students. So this is the impact data associated with option two. At the bottom, you can see more enrollment relief is received at Lemon Valley. You can see Alice Smith, you know, left at a very healthy place. With the opening of O'Brien 22-23, we were able to elevate the sixth graders out of Alice Smith, putting them where they are at that top table today. We also rezoned a portion of those students last year, effective this year, into Esther Bennett. So that's where you see Alice Smith on the top table is a result of the work I just described. Does give them a little bit of room. 35 students in Area D puts them just a bit more populated, you can see on the bottom table. So this is option two. Okay, so continuing to build, we sometimes like to piece these together in a logical fashion. Option three, we'll start with what we've talked about before up here. Area B, still looking to move that pocket of the Stead Elementary community, or pardon me, Lemon Valley Elementary community up into Desert Heights. Then rotating clockwise down, we took the liberty of breaking Area D up into two regions. And if we have the aerial on, you can see we're not really splitting neighborhoods. These are all warehouses and things like that. Only 25 students live in this eastern section of Area D. And so we, in this option, we propose still bringing them from Lemon Valley over to Alice Smith, but only 25. This western portion of Area D has only 10 students in it, but perhaps more logically could flow up Stead Boulevard and go to be rezoned into Stead Elementary. And so to offset that, we're now talking about Area A additionally. We haven't talked about this area. We lined it out from the outset. There's about 50 students in that pocket as well. And in this option 3, we'd be moving those students from Stead up to Desert Heights as well. So a lot more going on with this option 3. We've got a couple of orientation slides, not to disrupt the momentum here, but you know, sometimes it's helpful to sort of get a sense of the population density and the distribution. You can see these are, you know, geo-coded student information. You can kind of see where they live and just how many live in these different areas. More of just a graphical representation. This is an overlay, of course, with the aerial imagery, so you get a sense of, you know, that freeway boundary, those warehouses that I talked about versus the limited residential pockets on the sort of the south side of the freeway. So continuing with the impact data on option 3 on slide 18, again, moving all those various parts around, you have what you see here. Now, in the case of Lemon Valley Elementary School, the impact data, it's actually the same as option 2. Right, we're still moving all of Area D out of Lemon Valley and all of Area B out of Lemon Valley, but we're also adding in that movement of A out of Stead into Desert Heights. So, and splitting that Area D between Stead and Alice Smith. So similar impact data to the option 2, but just a little bit less of an impact to Alice Smith, I think, is the takeaway. If you saw in option 2, a little more enrollment projected at Alice Smith than maybe we'd like, so this takes some kids out of Area D and puts them into Stead Elementary, and Stead Elementary is really already full to begin with. You can see on the top table, so in order to make that possible, taking that Area A up to Desert Heights, which Desert Heights can't accommodate, as you can see on the bottom table. So hopefully everybody's tracking those musical chairs, but this is option 3. We like to really roll up our sleeves when we come to the zoning advisory committee. But
Adam, one question on Area A.
of course,
Can you describe the sort of southern boundary? Because on the maps we can see, it doesn't look like there's a clear road there that we'd usually use as a boundary. Is there actually indeed a major thoroughfare that's the southern end of that Area A boundary?
I think in one of the maps, it's like, yeah, this like looks like it's going through a neighborhood.
I'm thinking about this line. These ones.
Yeah.
This is Area A, right? Yeah.
so I'm
That and that.
gonna toggle to an aerial. You know what? I'm not gonna guess. I'm just gonna toggle to an aerial. I think I know the answer, but
And those kids already go to STEM.
that's right.
Right.
So we are talking about,
Oh, the splash park.
see, it might be a little bit harder to translate here. I'm pretty confident that this is a road, this is a drainage way, and this is a road, and this is like a subdivision, a butt, you know, like,
Yeah, like
that they back onto each other. Let
fence
me
or
see if I
something.
can find it on the aerial, because I mean, that's a valid question that I don't think is well depicted. You know what, this is gonna do me a little better.
Okay, there's that square.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you know what? One of these maps is going to do what I want it to do, but I can't see it with this guy. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Bear with me, you guys. We're
seeing GIS in action. Abutment is, right?
Abutment, right? Abutment, yes. It's okay, Martha, you don't have to write down our question either.
I'll Google it while he works on the map.
oh my goodness. Right there it is, folks.
Abut. An area next to or having common boundary with.
Thank you. All right, so these are the existing boundaries. Let's just take Stead. So it looks like the existing sort of straight line there is this guy. Kind of cuts through,
That's the current boundary. Okay.
yep, a drainage way, right? So we're building off of that and coming down this drainage way, I think, is that boundary.
like two separate
Okay.
subdivisions.
And then this guy is gonna snake over to,
Wow.
A lot of houses.
I'm not positive how it's getting over to this vertical. I assume that it's running up the backs of these houses.
Okay.
See, like this is where we would, am I in the right spot? Sorry, I think this is a good question and I'm trying to answer it, but
Yeah, you can see that little notch on our map. You
Yeah.
can see that
Yeah,
on ours. And it comes down from that.
yeah. Which this does look like. Right?
I mean, I kind of see what I'm asking is it's not crystal clear. Or it's not like a,
Looks like the line was drawn like in the middle of the street instead of just to
Yeah.
the left of those houses facing, which would make, like what you were saying about coming up against the back sides.
Yeah, so like, these houses look like they face this
Yes.
street,
Yeah.
so we need to clarify if these are two separate subdivisions. If they're not, then, right?
yeah.
I just propose as sort of an action for, if we're going to talk about Area A, it would be helpful next time to zero in on. Yeah.
I agree.
Option
No,
3.
I'm sorry that I can't answer that and it wasn't made more clear, but
Thank you.
nope, great point. So let's continue. I appreciate the question on option 4. This one, now we're finally talking about area C. Let me enlarge this. Area C has 110 elementary school students currently. It's a relatively new development. This is Military Drive. These students go to Lemon Valley today, and in option 4, we're proposing to rezone Area C and only Area C from Lemon Valley to Desert Heights.
And so that would mean that the people that are in the middle, so you have the three right there, people that were in the middle.
I'm sorry, the middle.
Area B, right?
Yeah.
Area B would have to drive through Area C to get to their elementary school.
So area in this option, area B right here in the middle, like you're saying, yeah, these guys drive down Military to Lemon to get to Lemon Drive.
Because there's no kind of cross.
No, not currently. This is, I think, Lear Boulevard doesn't connect across right now. This is all sort of a big cul-de-sac off of Military. So it is across the street, and I understand what you're saying. Like this blue line in option B would zag down and over. So these folks would drive down Military to get back up to Lemon.
However, Military is a really busy road, if you're familiar with it. If you
Mm-hmm.
go right onto Lemon, or onto Military there would probably be easier and
Okay. Well, so this is what the impact data, the enrollment data looks like for option 4. You can see it does not affect Alice Smith or Stead Elementary, only affects moving students from Lemon Valley to Desert Heights, and balances the numbers out fairly well. So, we tried to summarize some pros and cons or some facts about each of these options. You can see the total number of impacted students. I'll let you guys scroll through these yourselves in detail. We think, as we talked, option 2 kind of built on option 1, so maybe a little better sort of redistribution of capacity. Option 3 affects the greatest total number of students, so that was one that we felt was noteworthy, kind of on the downside, that the more students that are impacted, sometimes that's, less ideal despite the outcome. I should also add, I think, that the students in area A that we were just talking about are currently within the walk zone to Stead Elementary and would be in the bus zone to Desert Heights. So as opposed to some of the other options, moving area D from Lemon Valley to Alice Smith, they're on a bus already, it would just change the route. The other two areas, B and A, either are outside the walk zone or provided, well, actually, they're outside the walk zone. But option A currently is not provided a bus to Stead and would be, so it would basically have a transportation impact. And that leaves us with option 4, arguably better utilization numbers, slightly fewer total students impacted, fewer total schools impacted, and ultimately gets our staff recommendation to the extent that that's helpful. Sometimes we try to offer our 2 cents. So again, this one isn't agendized for action tonight. This is a carryover from last month and kind of felt like, just want to make sure that the community and the committee have enough time to digest and comment and deliberate on this. But these are the 4 options that we came up with. There's many more where that came from. If those of you who have been on this committee in the past, sometimes other ideas are proposed that are explored, and we come back with data associated with those, and those ultimately win the day. But at this point, we thought these were logical and had merit to ultimately, again, this is not like what we've done in the past. We're opening a new school and we must fill it. This is what we think is an opportunity to make an adjustment for the foreseeable future that will benefit the schools that are currently overcrowded, merely by shifting the enrollment zones within the same community. No impacts to the middle schools. They all feed up into O'Brien Middle School, and that wouldn't change.
Where does the county own the property that they're proposing possibly moving elementary school?
So that's,
It's right behind
Up.
O'Brien.
yeah, what slide was that? 6 or so?
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to move it to
Oh yeah, you're good. I know. There's a lot of roads.
So
closed.
page 3, it's in one of those new residential developments.
Red Star.
Adam, Christine Hull, for the record, could you go to slide 7? I just have a quick question about the other programs. So by quick count, it looks like Desert Heights, oops, sorry, my mic wasn't, okay, it looks like Desert Heights has about 10 rooms taken up by these special programs. Lemon Valley has 8, Alice Smith has 9, and Stead has 5. Are those are not counted in their student count? Sorry, wait. The pre-K are not counted in their percentages. Is that correct? Like their utilization rate?
They are counted as enrollment, sometimes the special programs take up, they don't have 25 kids in that classroom.
Sure.
So they're counted in the enrollment numbers.
Even the pre-K. So like the percentage at Lemon Valley includes the developmental pre-K.
Yes.
Okay. Let me backtrack. So thinking Desert Heights has about 10 classrooms taken up by these programs. So if they weren't included, because several of them are pre-K, and they're looking at they're this really low percentage, but in fact 10 of their rooms are spoken for, and not all of them are in their calculation, like the food bank and 21st Century Learning and Head Start are not counted in their percentage, but they're taking up rooms at an older building, right?
They do take up space. I'm not 100% sure exactly how it's incorporated into these spreadsheets, but
Okay.
I am, we're aware of the programs, and to the best of our ability, it's taken into consideration. Desert Heights and Alice Smith are the, 1990 era schools. So
Right.
a little bit,
Not as Lemon Valley instead are the oldest of the four.
That's right.
Okay. And one more question, going back one more slide to 6 with the variances. So with Desert Heights, do we have any idea of where those 17% are coming from? Like, are they already coming from Lemon Valley? Are they coming from one of those neighborhoods that we're talking about changing? So like people are interested in going to that school when they already live in that neighborhood. I'm curious. And I'm not saying you are going to look this up right this second. I'm just wondering if we can get information about where those 83 students, if they are in one of those areas.
we absolutely know where all of our students are zoned for and where they are enrolled. So we could provide that. I certainly don't have it today. I mean,
No, that's
Desert Heights, I would venture to guess that, it's usually a function of convenience.
Sure.
I work in the Stead area, but I live somewhere else. It's more convenient for me to enroll my student at the school that's closest to where I work, or in fact, I work at Desert Heights Elementary School, and so I want my kid to go there, stuff like that. It's not exactly on the way to anywhere.
No, it's not, and that's why I mean it's a large number, and so when you said that a lot of the students are enrolling in the charter school that's nearby, but then there's 17%, which is nearly 100 students that are on a variance to that school. I'm curious if they're coming from Lemon Valley. Like, are they saying, I don't want to be at this overcrowded school, or they're at Stead and they happen to live in A, B, or C? I think it would be really interesting for us to keep that in mind, that there's already people in a neighborhood interested in that school. It may help us to gauge, how are they getting there? Why are they wanting to go to that school? And without a lot of public comment so far, I think that would be helpful data for us to know.
Okay, we have that data.
Super. Thanks.
I can bring
Yeah,
that.
next time would be great. Thank you.
Can we track the reason for the variance?
I believe there's a disposition code. I think it's optional, but to a certain degree, yeah.
There is a code on there, there's a couple of options on it, and it's like program, like desired program, but it's very much up to the person to fill that out, because my daughter's in a signature academy, so we've had to fill one out, and so ours just says for program, because we want a program at that school. So,
Hi, Adam. Shannon Coley for the record. I'm looking at number 4, the staff recommendation, and then I'm looking back at the programs, and Lemon Valley has an early childhood education, and Desert Heights does not. And I'm wondering if that would cause a problem in number 4. If those kids were going to Lemon Valley for the early childhood in the 110, and they won't have it at Desert Heights, correct?
Again, not something I'm totally familiar with, but my suspicion is that that's a special program that if they're eligible for those services, they could be provided transportation to the location of that program. So when we talk about those students being rezoned, not to use the term those students, but the students in area C in option 4, if you're enrolled in a special program that's located at a school other than where you would be zoned, you would still be entitled to
Okay.
transportation and services at that location of that program.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. No, good catch though.
We have, Kristen DeHaan for the record, we have pre-K at our school, and a lot of the kids are bused if parents don't bring them. So it doesn't matter where they're zoned. It is considered a special program, is my understanding.
My understanding from the district is that there is, we have two different types of pre-K. We have special ed pre-K, and then we also have some early childhood centers. You don't necessarily have to be zoned to go to that center, but the special ed pre-K does get busing, regardless of, they go to their closest location.
That's actually true. If they're special education, they receive busing for special programs. But if they're not and they're just attending an early childhood program, then it's the parents' responsibility to bus them. But not every school has early childhood programs. Like Peavine, where I'm at, we don't have any
Right.
pre-K.
So likely if the one at Lemon Valley is not special, it's not considered a special ed program, they're not getting busing anyway. Their parents are already getting them there regardless of which area they live in.
And they're probably not necessarily all zoned for that school either. Yeah.
One day we'll have universal pre-K, one day.
Tyler Rogers for the record. One point and a second is a question. The first, I think it's important for all of us and the public to know, usually we have these meetings in the location that we're focused on, but we learned outside of the meeting that we couldn't because of AV limitations with staff on the county, which is totally understandable, but I think it's important because I think it is also important for us to get out into the community, but we didn't have the option. So I'd like that to just be noted in the record because I think it's important. Question, Adam, or do you know the history of Section D? It just is sort of surprising to me of how far those students are going to get to Lemon Valley when Stead and Alice Smith are kind of close by. So do you know the history of why that area remained in Lemon Valley across 395?
I do not. Aside from the changes we've made that we talked about earlier, those boundary lines haven't been adjusted, since I've been at the district.
I forget on that page, were the lines redrawn for Alice Smith at some point? I'm just trying to understand.
They were, but they were further to the south off the page. The Panther Valley area was
Okay.
rezoned into Esther Bennett into Sun Valley.
Thank you.
So Tyler, just to go off of your point, just so that I understand, the area below O'Brien instead, this is zoned.
For Lemon Valley currently.
That's right. That aerial, is kind of helpful. It's really this entire area that we were talking about. This is area D. I think we have approximately 10 elementary school students in this area currently, and this was like 25.
They're definitely kind of isolated communities in between all of the the industrial park. I think several are, yeah. Anyone have suggestions or things that we want
I do
to
have
be
one.
brought back? Yep.
I'd be curious, Adam, the next time that we meet, to look at an option, I guess sort of a deviation of option 2, but basically in option 2, you've split area D, half to go to STED, not half, but like in the middle of the geographic, the 10 to go to STED and the 25 to go to Alice Smith. I'd be curious to look at that, plus the idea of moving area C to Desert Heights. If we're redrawing these lines, I'm just sort of curious to think about why are we leaving this population that's so far from Lemon Valley, if Lemon Valley's struggling, and moving these folks closer to the schools that are closer to them geographically. Do you follow me?
Maybe. Let me try.
Page 15.
So instead of
So it's
these
basically,
two, so these, yes, but instead of these two, it'd be this one.
Yeah.
Got it.
An option 5 or option 3A, maybe.
Thank you.
Darren Fleck for the record. Adam, was there any chance of getting the admin, if they had any input into, and I don't know how new the admin is in each of those 4 buildings, but just a sense of what they have to work with? You know, I know those special programs can just throw a wrench into everything depending on how many rooms, and, you know, especially things with programs like SIP and strategies. Do you guys consult with them with this type of stuff, or is it, I mean, I know you guys have such a big picture you have to look at, because I'm wondering, like when we had when we did last year, and we did down by
We did the walkthrough through
Lynn's, right, with what's his name there, I forget, and he came in and talked about the smaller buildings and everything like that, just as a sense of what they might think they have to offer as opposed to what they might be afraid of when it comes to how many kids.
Yeah, I mean, so talking about the principals at these schools, I did meet with them and go over the PowerPoint before the last meeting, so it's been some time. Not a lot of feedback or questions. You know, it was brief. We were being brisk. It was done as much so to get their input as it was to help inform them in the anticipation that they get questions from their families, so that they can kind of communicate and understand what's being proposed as well. You know, we talked at the onset about the fact that Stead and Lemon Valley are much older schools and different facilities versus Alice Smith and Desert Heights. They all have a number of portables on their campuses. In fact, Lemon Valley, I believe this past summer, we relocated an additional portable to Lemon Valley Elementary School. You know, so I've always heard from a variety of principals that those older schools built in the 60s are a little bit more challenged to kind of accommodate those types of numbers. But no, I didn't have too much additional feedback from those guys.
I think the only other thing that I would like to see is what the temperature of the committee and potentially the Board of Trustees would be to look at this for next year. I know that would be a fairly quick turnaround, but to offer the relief for that school, especially because it is a much older building, and we know that this area is growing, so I would be really curious if that would be a possibility, or if the Board of Trustees would be interested in if we could recommend that to them, that the sooner we could give some relief to the school and balance this area out. So instead of waiting a year and a half, essentially. I know it only gives them a semester's worth of notice, but I feel like it's still sufficient time, because we've been talking about this since September. So it's not that there hasn't been an awareness that we're looking at this for them.
It's not like, I guess it's not a rule, but I feel that we've always like pushed to have it further out for the change. I'm just, that I've been oriented around that expectation. So it is within our power. There's not like we will not change something until X year out.
I mean, looking through the administrative guidelines, there is nothing that says that it cannot be next year. I think we've always given the grace of as much of a full school year as possible. But also, I think Adam mentioned this at the beginning, a lot of our decisions have been made around a new school opening. And so there was always that 1 year or potentially year and a half, 2 year date ahead. So I think it made a lot of sense. Like, oh, well, we know this new school's opening, so we'll make the date happen then for all these changes. We don't have that happening. So there is no reason why not to give them relief if we know we have room. I guess and this may be a conversation that we would need to have with some of the community. We'd need to get some feedback from the community if they're wanting to make that change sooner than later. But overcrowded schools are not a great place. They're lovely places, and the teachers and the staff make them to the best of their ability. But I don't know why it would make sense to leave a school overcrowded when a school that's nearby and can take them could do it. So I would be curious if we'd like to have that conversation when we go to make action.
Can I, Darren Fleck, for the record, also add on to maybe a possible consideration for that with a lot of the grant money that are funding some teaching positions over the past 2 years, no longer being re-upped. And when you have an overcrowded school like that may be able to diffuse the student population with some grant-funded teaching spots, and then those grant-funded teaching spots disappear, and now you're putting bigger class sizes into an older building. I think Christine's idea about possibly looking for something to move forward, especially when you're going to run into those grant positions disappearing by next school year, on top of this growing population for places like Lemon Valley, might be a valid consideration.
Is that known data that we can get from the district of the number of grant positions at Lemon Valley?
Well, as far as elementary schools right now, I believe that across elementary schools you have one. It's a learning facilitator position that is grant funded that will be ending this year. Other than that, site specific, there might be something else, but that's really the only certified position that I'm aware of that's grant funded.
That they may have some title funding.
They have title funding that they may have, but that wouldn't be grant funding that expires. That wouldn't expire this.
I can look into it. I would just comment for the record that, to my knowledge, there are no hard and fast rules about advance notice. It's just been a best practice and a courtesy. There are examples, in fact, back on slide 4, that trailing action associated with Silver Lake, and there were complications. There's complications with every rezoning action, not the least of which was COVID in 2020. But that action was only finally approved inside of a year ahead of it going into effect. So that's one I recall, sort of pseudo precedent where we have set into action rezoning impacts with less than a full school year's notice. So, and there's no construction or action that needs to be completed before this could go into effect.
So, I think we Did anybody else have any other thoughts for next time? Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to 2.03, presentation and discussion on the district-wide school facility modernization plan, which is being conducted by Canon Design. So that is this guy. All right. Adam Searcy again.
Okay, thanks, folks. Sorry for talking so much tonight. Appreciate the feedback on that last one. This is what we are terming a facility modernization plan. The short summary of what this, the origins of this and what it hopes to become is that, you know, in 2016, the community developed and passed a ballot initiative raising the local sales tax, and there were a list of projects that this revenue stream was to be directed towards, including ongoing maintenance, major capital renewal of our school facilities, including the construction of many new schools, and what at the time was termed core school investments, at the time envisioned to be major investments into our existing schools, not just building new schools for existing and future growth. So since that passed, the school district has expanded schools, built and upgraded central services facilities, and opened 8 new schools since 2019. Over that so addressing the pent-up overcrowding that existed prior to 2016 and the growth that has continued has been our top priority, as well as capital renewal, as I mentioned, replacing windows and replacing roofs and replacing boilers and things like that. Also during that time, we've made several significant core school investments, maybe, bless you, most notably demonstrated with our projects at Swope Middle School and O'Brien Middle School that just opened this school year. So we are very, very fortunate in this community to be blessed with these revenue streams, which are indefinite, which will persist, which have remained strong. They're not tied to enrollment. They are exclusively available for use in our facilities in our capital department. So it's important to note, you know, unfortunately, we're not able to raise teacher wages or hire additional bus drivers with these revenue streams, but we can invest these significant revenue streams into our school facilities. And so, you know, as we look at the prospects of enrollments plateauing to a degree, pent-up overcrowding having been addressed through the major new school construction, forecasting our revenues and our needs, we've reserved funds for capital renewal, you know, the pay that first, the basic maintenance and major renewal of our schools. We've reserved revenues for what we anticipate for future additional schools. There is growth in our community, particularly in the North Valleys and the Spanish Springs area, and we do anticipate the need to build additional new schools within the 10 and 20-year horizon, but not likely at the pace that we have been. That then leaves us with revenues that can and must be redirected more intensively towards our existing school facilities. So it's a large project, a large-scale endeavor. We issued an RFP earlier in 2022 for an external consultant. This is a fresh set of eyes, an independent expert in our community, and ultimately selected Canon Design, an architectural firm based out of Los Angeles, who's performed similar exercises for major and small school districts across the nation. So they've been to work for quite some time throughout our community, and this is an update, a presentation that was given to our Board of Trustees just last week. And the reason that I'm bringing it to this committee is not only to get the word out, but you know, this is a public meeting. You guys are all above average when it comes to your understanding of the school district and your level of engagement. And we're really, really trying hard to get as much engagement, as much outreach, as much awareness, and as much input throughout this process, because this really is anticipated to form the foundation of some significant investments and transformative outcomes across all of our school facilities for the 5 and 10-year horizon period. Okay, so this isn't my slide deck, but we're gonna focus in on this fun slide. This is sort of a timeline of the work that this committee and all of these advisory groups have been working on. We've got a couple of key groups. We've got our district leadership team. Of course, the consultant has been presenting to some of the key staff in the school district, including the superintendent, getting input there. District planning group. So this group is composed mostly of like director level folks across the district, a wide array of perspectives and deep institutional knowledge, but really only district staff there. This stakeholder advisory group, particularly diverse. Yes, we've got member Coley has volunteered on that, as well as you can see Christine. This is a photo taken from the new Hug, where Cannon hosted this workshop. Some of you might recognize Principal Mike Nakashima there, former Board of Trustee President Katie Simon Holland, and the list goes on, and it's a very intentionally developed, diverse group representing a lot of different community groups, really trying to get the full spectrum of voices and perspectives to provide input to this consultant. And then, of course, on the right hand, we've got these open town hall community meetings. We've hosted online platforms. We've hosted in-person platforms to get the word out, to receive engagement, et cetera. We're trying to pace through this process leading up to a spring conclusion, but this is just more overview. This slide's intended to describe sort of the multifaceted nature of this work. This is not just which school's the oldest, which one's the most overcrowded by the numbers. That's a component of this, maybe the facility condition component, just brick and mortar, how much will it cost to replace all of the broken, expired pieces of the building. But this is a much more comprehensive assessment. So educational vision, taking into consideration the long-term trajectory of curriculum and modern instruction strategies in the community and in the nation. Looking at educational adequacy, we talk about that in terms of the spaces themselves within our buildings, regardless of how they're arranged. Different buildings configured differently, but when you break it down to the spaces themselves and you look at, say, for example, Lemon Valley versus, say, Inskeep or Bohatch or whatever elementary school you might be more familiar with, and you can quickly see the inequity with regards to the spaces, regardless of how they're configured. That's really educational adequacy. Equity, taking other socioeconomic variables into consideration when we evaluate each school, free and reduced lunch percentages, other performance variables that might indicate different solutions for different communities based on different variables relative to that community. Of course, capacity, important consideration. Do we need to do an expansion and a modernization or just a modernization? Really looking at underutilized schools. There are a number of schools that actually have far too few students in them, and rezoning isn't an obvious solution. That's also detrimental to the success of the school, and looking at options possibly to be more efficient in how we sort of provide service to all of our students. So community engagement, also an extremely critical aspect. This firm is omni-talented, right? They've got community engagement professionals, they've got architects, they've got GIS specialists, et cetera, and this is not just a single element type of endeavor. Ultimately, trying to put together a plan which considers all of these initial variables, but also is context sensitive in terms of schedule and budget, not just wish list type of exercise. So I'm going to try and speed through these a little bit more. We've got the district planning group. As I mentioned earlier, some fun photos from some of the work that they've conducted. We spent a full day together yesterday. Literally yesterday, this group, Christine joined us as a liaison from the stakeholder advisory group, really rolling up their sleeves, moving past these visioning and guiding principles phases and rolling out some spreadsheets and some maps and talking very specifically, still at a concept level, but specifically about verticals and schools themselves. So, it's in its formative stages, but just to brainstorm through opportunities with these types of folks to ultimately advise the consultant. But all of these types of areas of emphasis were raised up from these groups as opportunities of need or areas of need for this this planning exercise. We've talked about all these groups: stakeholder advisory group, the non-district staff group, the community forums. We've met. Now, this is, I think, a part of this community engagement effort. We wish the room was packed and whatnot, but every person who hears this, I think, could share it with a friend, right? We've participated a couple times with the Student Advisory Council. They have a pretty active group, not different from yourselves, of current students. So getting their input to a degree, and then extended an open online survey and tried to publish and promote that a variety of different ways. You can see, over 1,200 responses, almost a response from every single school, and they're going to be drilling into the details of those respondents and trying to see if there are areas that we need more representation to try and get a more comprehensive response there. Diving into the data a little bit, this is a little more quantitative assessment, facility condition assessment or index. You can see this graph, it's interesting. Older schools to the left, worse condition to the top. So by and large, this trend line moves as you would expect. The newer schools are in better condition, the older schools not so much, and teasing out anomalies here and there. You can see Reed kind of hitting middle age, about 42 years old, but has some real problems. Sparks High, Risley, Reno High, GOM, just names off the top here, all built in the 60s really, and obviously, or as you would expect, a little bit higher on the scale as far as poor condition. So this is just one data point. This is an interesting graphic, sort of the aerial footprint of all of our schools categorized by type. So I've talked a little bit about how different schools may warrant different or have different needs based on some other context. So trying to develop perhaps a somewhat standard solution or scope for improving each school based on type. How do we compare these? What does this say? No, how do we compare and prioritize schools that were built in different eras? So that's when I talked about looking at it from a space standpoint rather than a square footage or condition. So Lemon Valley Elementary School was built in 1965 approximately. I'm sure it says precisely on there, but whereas Alice Smith was built in, say, 1998. But taking that aside, they're completely different configuration, breaking it down into its components, and then trying to see, hey, what is Lemon Valley Elementary School missing that Alice Smith has? And what are they both missing, perhaps, relative to Bohatch and Inskeep, our newest schools, kind of setting the bar? Is there a cost-effective way to create a greater degree of parity from a facility standpoint between our newest and most modern standards and all of the rest of our schools is generally the idea. So this next slide is just
Adam, sorry, hearing something you say, cost effectiveness. Can you quickly describe how you think about cost effectiveness in this? Like, I haven't, that means something in my industry, but I'm curious in like an education perspective, how you look at cost effectiveness.
So this FCI is an important metric. Sometimes it's essentially a ratio of the cost of replacement of the various out-of-date parts and pieces of a building versus the cost of complete replacement. So cost effectiveness probably isn't as quantitative or precise a term in this context as maybe some might be used to. But, you know, sometimes it has to do with the impact to the students that a solution might cause. So in the case of Lemon Valley Elementary School, this is entirely hypothetical, but there may not be the physical ability to reconstruct that school without completely vacating the campus for more than a school year. So the level of disruption on the student body that might cause may or may not be worth versus the benefit of the completely replaced new school. So looking at construction solutions that could modernize and improve that building while allowing the students to continue to attend that school throughout the process might be the most cost-effective solution in that instance, versus in these cases oftentimes if the cost of replacement is, or rather the cost of the repairs is perhaps 40% of the cost of replacement. That's a common benchmark that school districts have used. Different school districts have set different benchmarks for replacement versus reinvestment. If you put $20 million into Lemon Valley Elementary School and you're still left with 65-year-old bones that you're actually rather regretful to have retained, that's the type of analysis that isn't completely black and white, but neither is sort of the investigative process that we're going through. So it's very much an individual exercise by each school, and I think the context extends into the neighboring schools. If there's capacity elsewhere within that community of schools, that might flavor the appropriate solution. I don't know if that's helpful. It's complicated. I mean, it's just multifaceted. So just moving on, this is just another slide illustrating the same information. Schools by type, year of construction. You can see the grouping. You can see just how many schools were built in the 1960s, often referred to as baby boomer era schools. Everybody is familiar with them, but there's a lot of middle schools in that era as well, sometimes referred to as wings, but Swope is of that ilk, as is Trainer, Dilworth, Sparks Middle. Vaughn is a variant on that same type of school built in that 1955 to 1965 type of era, over 60 years old, and many others, of course. This is a little bit more about that educational adequacy assessment, not just the spaces and how they stack up against one another, but how those spaces, I guess, function, how they are arranged with one another and enable collaboration and relationships throughout the school building community. Wellness sometimes, whether it's school clinic facilities, school counselor facilities, these are spaces that were designed very differently in 1960 than they are today and are ever more important in our schools. Things like daylighting, things like thermal comfort, the standards, even the modern HVAC codes that we're required to build our newest schools to versus what we have in our 50 and 60-year-old schools. Safety and security of utmost importance, but also a multifaceted topic. Technology and furniture. There's a scenario where some of our newer schools, newish schools, 25-year-old schools perhaps, might not need dramatic physical modifications, but still are not quite at par in some ways with our newest schools, and so might they benefit optimally from a different degree of investment. Perhaps technology and furniture might provide that revitalization rather than knocking down walls and expanding and that type of dramatic investment. That's the concept. I'm just describing the concept that some of these areas look at and try to basically grade or score relative to the benchmark that is our current and newest schools. All right, this has been a common theme across many of our meetings, and heard so much about the needs of the different communities, and perhaps not considering a one-size-fits-all solution, implementing exactly the same facility solution for every school of a like type, but rather considering some context variables relative to the community it serves. This was emphasized in the original RFP, an emphasis on equity and efficiency across the entire district portfolio of buildings. Whether it's providing a similar experience at Lemon Valley Elementary School as Inskeep Elementary School, and how do we accomplish that, but also doing so efficiently. For every Lemon Valley Elementary School, we have a similar designed or a similar style elementary school that maybe has 300 students in it. That's really not particularly efficient for the school district or well served for the students that go there. So this gets a little bit more at the facility or the utilization or the efficiency side of it. And this is a crude preliminary analysis done by the consultant, not considering geographic variables, basically just looking at our total number of seats divided by our total enrollment and rolling it up by area, saying, for example, at the elementary school level in the Northwest Reno area, we have approximately, well, I think that number 909 represents the enrollment, and that's 79% of the total seats that we have available. Again, a crude initial analysis, but intended to try to point out high-level areas where maybe we have excess capacity and what might we do with that, and maybe areas where we have a deficit of capacity. So we're still zooming in on those opportunities, but it's all about efficient use of our resources. This is I think, a hypothetical high school master schedule. But again, looking at this level of detail to see if, hey, could we more efficiently use the space that we have if we just more strategically scheduled it. So I'll go through these next steps and then try to close it out. These are some big milestones in January. We've got November 16th. That was yesterday, as I described, a big workshop with the district planning group. But really, the consultant's crunching on a lot of feedback and a lot of data right now. And I think in January, perhaps we'll come back to this committee, but definitely you'll see information presented to the board that, will make, provide options for public discussion that are specific to individual schools. So those look to take place in January. In December, we'll be providing the board with an update. This is the CFPC is the Capital Funding Protection Committee, another advisory committee to the Board of Trustees like the Zoning Committee. So very similar presentation to what I'm giving now, but just always updating with, they'll have even more advanced information in December. You can see this then playing out through February and then even into April as needed. So coming back in January, offering some preliminary recommendations very publicly, getting a lot of feedback on that, having some iterative development throughout February, March, and April, ultimately intended to inform kind of our fiscal year cycle. All right, and this is the last slide. These are the details on these upcoming community forums. So tell your friends, we haven't pinned down a location, but we've tried to reserve the dates in all of our calendars. We've got this website So our main homepage / FMP, Facilities Modernization Plan, trying to put all of our information at that location. But if anything, I wanted to bring it to this committee because number one, you guys are head of your class as far as contributors and engagement. Number two, I anticipate that we're going to talk about this in the next item. Some of the recommendations that are probable to come out of this study warrant pause on the part of some of our work. Like, this is a large-scale study that's being done that may make recommendations that would otherwise change our zoning decisions. So while there might be, for example, a need to revisit the enrollment boundaries amongst the Clayton feeders, let's wait for a minute and see what this study reveals or recommends with regards to those schools before we try to fix something that, or adjust something that is being proposed to be adjusted other ways. And then lastly, it is also likely that recommendations that this study may present will require boundary adjustments. And so as this body's worked primarily has been driven by new schools, scenarios, whether it's, we're talking about diverse scenarios, demolition of 60-year-old middle schools in replacement with perhaps a K-8 facility, a new style building that allows us to consolidate an elementary school as well. It's more efficient for the district from an overhead perspective. It's superior facility for the students. It's brand new, but it would involve enrollment zoning boundary adjustments, and certainly will be a very impactful change to the community. And that we don't want to dance around the gravity of the change and the impact, but we really are enthused about the upside. The possibility of making these types of upgrades or trade up type of investments is really exciting to us. So I'll leave it at that. That's really just a teaser. I am sorry I don't have more specifics, but we wanted to take advantage of the audience and your all's engagement to try and get the word out. These are revenues that are present. This is not an exercise in support of a future bond measure. These revenues are real, and they are forecasted to remain strong. These needs are imminent. These needs are today. And so this consultant is making an independent recommendation with our input to the Board of Trustees. Ultimately, it's merely a plan, but it's one that our team is positioning ourselves to be prepared to execute as soon as possible. So I know Christine has been super involved, as has Shannon. I would welcome your guys' additions to my little presentation, but thanks for listening to that.
Thank you for all that. Shannon, do you want to share anything? You covered it all? Yeah. I think the feeling at the two meetings that Shannon and I have been able to be a part of, it, as well as yesterday's, was I think it's really important that the community hears this information and knows that this is an investment in every area of our community. It's no longer, that area and that area get brand new schools and all the attention's on them. And I know that has been a feeling for a while, and there's been a lot of, well, why did that area get this amazing thing and we didn't? And so this is the opportunity to bring about that equity, and give a fresh set of eyes. The other thing I have to say about the whole group at Cannon, which is a lot, like Adam said, a large group of people who all have some specialty areas that are wildly impressive, like the GIS stuff. They have entrenched themselves in our community. They've visited as many schools as they possibly have. They've walked the schools, they've talked to students and teachers and principals and community members, and they are not doing this from, they live in Boston and they're giving us advice on what Boston does, right? They're thinking about us. And so I can't say enough about this process, that this is exactly what our district needed, because that tax revenue is everyone's tax revenue. And I think it's really important that we're investing in all of the schools. So I appreciate getting to be a part of the process, and it's been really fun. So please go to those community meetings, encourage your friends to go to them. I'm sure there'll be another survey once the recommendations come out. So encourage your friends to take the surveys, share it on your social channels, all that stuff. Any other thoughts before we?
If you guys do have questions for me now or later, I mean, you all have my contact information. This is something that's so important to the school district. I would be glad to engage with you individually or with a group maybe that you're associated with. I really want folks to understand this opportunity and provide input to help shape it.
All right. If there's nothing else, we will move on to 2.04. Adam for the presentation again.
All right, thanks you guys. So this was one that, we wanted to put something on the record related to some areas of interest and provide the committee and the community an update with not only specific areas, but district-wide trends. So this is starting off, a lot of words on this slide, but I used the word plateau to describe the enrollment, and that's a one-word summary of kind of where we're at. District enrollment is down 1.4% from last school year. The lowest kindergarten enrollment in over 20 years. That's due in part to some enrollment changes that came out of the state legislature, but that is a continuation of a trend that we have seen for many years prior to the pandemic even. A couple of unique areas of interest, a little bit down here, a little bit up there in unique areas. And then we're going to talk a little bit about a bubble. When you hear me say bubble, I'll explain that on slide 5. So just some data points there. This is the district-wide total enrollment projections for the next 5 years. You can see where we're at on the left at 61,278 plus or minus. Again, that's down 1.5% from last school year, and you can see really the impacts of the bubble that we'll see, district-wide flat or declining enrollment, and only modest increases going forward for the next 5 years. And this is district-wide.
Kristen Dahan for the record. Back on slide 3, it talks about North Star, and I'm wondering if part of that is COVID related, that North Star is the one that's online school,
Yep.
right?
Good
So it was a lot of people all at once were going there, and then as restrictions have been lifted and whatnot, and people are feeling a little bit better about being in person, perhaps they're moving back to their own schools, their zoned schools.
I think to a large degree. I think it's important. Thank you for bringing that up. North Star is our exclusively online option for our students that did quadruple in enrollment throughout 21-22 or 2021 and 21-22. That's decreased significantly. Don't have the numbers teased out how many of them actually went back to brick and mortar and how many left the district permanently, but North Star is our online school. So again, relatively flat district-wide enrollment projections. Slide 5 is really depicting that bubble. So these current 9th, 10th, 11th graders are students that were born pre-Great Recession when everything was booming. I don't know what was going on exactly, but we've got over 5,000 students per grade level in 9th and 10th grade. These are district-wide numbers. 9th graders, 5,200 9th graders. No other grade level really is above 4,600. So what happens is that, you know, future kindergarten classes are anticipated to come in at that 4,500 level once that anomaly from this school year, you know, passes. So when a grade of 5,000 students graduates and a grade of 4,500 students replaces them, we're going to see that district-wide enrollment drop by 500 students. Now, there's a lot of other movements in and out, and of course there is growth and development and movement into the community at large, so it's not that precise, but that bubble will impact our district-wide numbers for the next 4 years as that matriculates out of the district, and particularly that will be felt at our high schools. Obviously, that's where the kids are now. So you'll see that if we get into a presentation where we're looking at high school enrollment numbers. Wow, it looks like, you know, North Valley's kind of dips and then ultimately starts coming back up. Well, that's this.
So are you saying you expect kinder numbers to be higher next year?
Yeah. Yeah, we expect them to, and I know we have a projection for it. I just don't have it handy, but basically we expect it to resume to a similar 4,500 level that we've had before. You know, this is, what did they exactly do? Change the birth date?
They changed the birth date, and then they changed like pre-K requirements and stuff too. I don't even understand it all.
So,
I have to ask my secretary.
in a way, there was only like a 9-month cohort
Yeah.
here. And so next school year, it'll still just be a 12-month cohort, just kind of moves that. They are down. I don't think I have that information in this slide, but birth rates nationally and in Washoe County have been on a long-standing decline. Again, probably 20 years we're at a lower birth rate to Washoe County mothers, as well as that student generation rate continues to decline, number of students per capita.
Except for 14 and 15-year-olds in 9th and 10th grade. Just for everybody's information, it was the state legislature that changed the date for kindergarten, not Washoe County. So you have to be 5 before the first day of school now, which is different in every county, by the way. Instead of a solid date of by September 30th, you have to be 5. So that gave us like a 2 to 3 month window of kids. I have a cousin in that little pocket, and so she was.
I just got 2 kindergartners yesterday that were born on September 15th.
Yeah, but then there's like some exclusions, which is why I know it was really confusing. So I would expect that kindergarten number to go up a little bit because there's a group that thought they were going to start this year and didn't. And I mean, just personal anecdotal, my cousin's daughter and several of their little play group friends all enrolled in a private kindergarten program because of this. So, and I know that's coming up in your future slides about our competition.
Yeah, so lots going on. This is a slide from our Canon group. You can kind of see this is a sliver of the schools that are more than 50 years old. We've got an average age of 41 schools. This blue circle kind of got out of sync from the PowerPoint, but you can see the location of those red dots represent those 50 and 60-year-old schools. So all of you can place yourselves at Vaughn and Trainer and other areas. What we've been talking about, Stead and Lemon Valley, also 60-year-old schools. This is another slide I lifted from Canon, but this speaks to the enrollment trends of district and state-sponsored charter schools. So students not attending Washoe County School District schools have increased by a factor of 4 in the last 20 years. Dramatic and persistent increase. This blip is COVID, but we anticipate this upward trend to continue, in essence, abating any enrollment growth that the district would otherwise experience and need to accommodate further contributing to that plateauing effect. Okay, so
Just
that's,
so I can understand, this is Washoe County only data, the
Yep.
competition. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
so that's kind of the overview of enrollment district-wide. Trends that we're seeing. However, so this next one is Spanish Springs area elementary and middle schools. This is a point of interest and concern for the public, the committee, and of course, the staff ourselves. This is the lay of the land. When I talk North Spanish Springs, you can get your bearings, Bohatch, and we've got a red star in the middle here, site of a proposed new elementary school. This is smack dab in the middle of the Stonebrook development, if you're familiar with that area, right next to Andelin Farms. We own a 10-acre parcel out there that's been master planned for an elementary school, and we anticipate designing and building that in the near future. We'll come back to this slide in a second. You can see on the next slide some of the actions that we've taken up there. Again, this is just to talk about, like we described in the North Valleys, an area of dynamic and significant growth and change, which is anticipated to persist. So it's been a few years, but now already they're basically outgrowing their resources. Now, this is an important slide showing what we're looking at in North Valleys as an opportunity to redistribute that enrollment. I want to take a minute for your benefit. I've done this for the school board as well, to flip back and forth from these maps. So hopefully you can, I'll leave it on this one if you can look at your pages, but as opposed to North Valleys, where we thought there were some opportunities to rezone our way out of the issue, at Hall, we've got a tremendous boundary in the form of Pyramid Highway. And this is, could we relieve Bohatch through rezoning alone? Do we really need to build a new elementary school? In the case of Hall, we don't like the boundary of Pyramid Highway if we can avoid it, as well as if you're familiar with the Five Ridges development is going in off of Highland Ranch Parkway. Right in this area is about 2,000 residential homes actively under construction, zoned for Hall. We want to preserve that capacity at Hall to absorb that in the near future. Sepulveda is on this list. Sepulveda, and again, Bohatch is so populous and projected to grow so significantly that we're talking about a couple hundred students that we would have to rezone out of Bohatch to really resolve this issue. No one school could accommodate that alone. In the case of Sepulveda, you've only really got a small area that you could consider rezoning from Bohatch into Sepulveda, and honestly, those neighborhoods are closer to Bohatch today than they are to Sepulveda, so we really don't like that option for a lot of reasons. Just going along these bar charts, Spanish Springs Elementary as a potential relief valve for Bohatch. We don't care for that boundary, to cross that boundary of La Posada, particularly we could, but it's an ever increasingly significant boundary and obstacle. And there's also a lot of significant growth planned north of what's depicted on this map, actively under construction. Similar with Taylor, I think the long-term plan is to relieve Taylor with Spanish Springs, so those two kind of work together and span Pyramid Highway today and look to lean on each other a little bit into the future. So again, between those existing geographic barriers, La Posada, Pyramid Highway, as well as the growth that's planned in those areas, we're reluctant to use the capacity that may exist today in some of those schools to relieve Bohatch in the short term. It's just a question that's come up numerous times that I wanted to try to address. This next slide is similar with respect to the middle schools. I think it is noteworthy. Sky Ranch has one portable, I believe, today. Sky Ranch Middle School. Bohatch, I believe, has two. They are both, I don't have the brush fire charts in this presentation, but they are both projected to continue to grow somewhat significantly in enrollment. And we have plans to add portables to those schools, I believe next summer, if not also in the following summer, 24, 25. So next Tuesday, we will be taking an item to the school board for action to fund the design of this proposed new elementary school. And the current thinking from staff, and this is the type of thing that needs to be approved every step of the way by the board. But with their approval next week, we would have the funding to begin the design for that new elementary school. That would place us at a point next fall where we've completed the design, we're analyzing the enrollment. If it continues as we've projected, we'll likely be recommending we proceed immediately into construction phase. We own the land, we will have designed the project, and we'll proceed very similar to how things have proceeded with Polikitis and now Jaywood Raw, where Polikitis was opened, it quickly was filled, it became overcrowded for a short period. We timed our design and start of construction to complement that. There's always those overlap types of pinch points. Portables were placed at Polikitis. This area is similar in a lot of ways, but we feel we're positioned to implement a permanent solution. Now, should we get to that point where the board approves the construction to begin, we'll be at that point, it will be fall of 2023, and we would be on a pace to open the school in the fall of 2025. And at that point, it would be imminent, or it would be certain, and we would agendize rezoning to accommodate that new school. Our thinking, or the direction we're heading, is that we would wait until that time to also reevaluate the middle school boundaries. As I mentioned, Sky Ranch is a little bit over capacity today and forecasted to grow. Currently, Shaw Middle School a little underutilized. We talked about charters earlier. If you're familiar with that area, the Pinecrest Charter School has opened since Sky Ranch opened. I believe they opened in 2020, 2021. Took a lot of students out of Shaw. Shaw currently has 3 feeder elementary schools. Sky Ranch has 4, technically. So the thinking is that whatever boundary for this new school ends up, that they would likely be rezoned into Shaw. That would take the area that's currently in turquoise and move it into Shaw. Turquoise is Sky Ranch here. So these are just ideas that we've batted around. We'll bring it to the committee and we'll dive into the details. The reason I wanted to present this to you and put on the record is to address the important concerns around growth and overcrowding in these schools. Hey, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And at least communicate our thinking and our planning. So I think that's the content on this one. I can dive into the next set of slides or discuss this area.
Can I just address a couple issues with this? And obviously you guys are in a bind with the pace of growth here. The middle school numbers, I think, like I mentioned with Mendive where I teach, we have 145 kids on variance. So if you take that 15% away, that puts us at 63. And I greatly appreciate the trying to do it all in one fell swoop. But I would hope that this committee and the executive staff would appreciate some of the educational drawbacks that being at 63% does. Currently, neither Mendive nor Shaw have a Spanish program. Only Sky Ranch does. So you have kids going into high school who do not have the advantage of entering at a higher level Spanish program. that those kids at Sky Ranch do currently. Shaw is such at a low capacity just because they don't have the additional ability for kids to easily variance in, that they also lost their foods program. Mendive, like I said, we have been able to keep a foods program mainly because we have a variance of 145 kids, mainly coming from Dilworth, Sparks, and sometimes Sky Ranch as well. And we're talking, and I think about when you try to talk to somebody about this and what it looks like. And Adam is completely right about trying to do this in a rational way. But we have 6 empty classrooms plus 2 North Star classrooms at Mendive. Shaw probably has 8 empty classrooms, if not more, that are just sitting empty while we're paying to move trailers around. And this staff, especially the presentation you guys just gave, which is phenomenal, I just think what people are seeing and what the community sees feeds sometimes into the crazy talk, right? About how we get people who get so angry about a government agency that's trying to do the right thing, but then they see empty classrooms and a district spending money to put trailers in. And there is an educational impact on the kids. So I understand where Adam and the executive committee is coming from with trying to take this at a pace, especially when there's going to be big changes here soon. But I think there's also an impact that needs to be talked about in how urgently we move to make arrangements with the secondary programs, because they're going to be impacted greatly. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Darren. I'll move into the last area I wanted to touch on with everyone, a little bit about the Clayton area schools. We've talked about this, a couple of fits and starts. I think we got waylaid by COVID, and then really this facility modernization plan has been under development for a bit and has basically, well, part of the reason that we wanted to talk about this area is because it's being put on pause from a zoning advisory committee perspective, at least until the conclusion of the facilities modernization study is known. Another interesting variable, so, you know, see if you can figure this map out. I'm not even going to try to explain it. Note, couple points I'll note. Forget about all the splitting that's taking place up here. There's not an overcapacity issue anywhere, but Elmcrest zone is just incredibly oddly shaped, spanning both sides of I-80, and also includes a non-contiguous portion way up here on both sides of Virginia Street, interrupted by the Peavine zone. These are legacy enrollment boundaries that has been on our, and if you guys know Randy Baxley's radar, since the zoning advisory committee was formed, and we just have not had the bandwidth, you know, been focusing on new schools, et cetera. And then, like I said, got sidetracked by COVID. It is very much on our radar, but knowing the magnitude of the changes that may be recommended through this study, we wanted to still keep it on pause despite the irregular nature of some of these boundaries. And then the other point I wanted to note on this slide is this red star here. So if you're familiar with this area or drive by I-80 in McCarran and seen the old 24-hour fitness right there, that has been purchased and approved to be remodeled into a district-sponsored charter school opening next school year. Coral Academy is establishing a new location there, which, you know, they ramp up in enrollment, but that'll be something on the order of 500 students K through 5 who are likely to attend that school and not attend Washoe County School District schools. So it remains to be seen exactly from where they will draw. They have a pretty diverse historical kind of enrollment pattern, but that's a big impact that, or a big variable that also will influence our decisions going forward with this area.
Adam, quick question on the Coral Academy. So are they moving from the site that's over near here, or they're adding an additional campus?
This is an expansion,
Okay.
as they term it, or an additional campus. Yep.
Okay, because I know they also just opened one in the other 24-hour fitness off Neal a few years ago.
Yep,
But
exactly.
that's their high school campus, I think. So
That
this
one's
is
a-
an elementary.
This one's a K-5. The
Okay.
one in the 24-hour fitness off of Neal's a K-5. It's
Oh.
right down the street from their high
Their
school
Okay,
campus.
that's okay. I'm thinking of a different place. Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Adam, you said a district-approved charter school. What does that mean?
Yeah, so charter schools, and I'm a bit of a novice on this too, they have to be chartered by either the state public charter school authority or the district. The district has several. Coral is one of them. Coral has, multiple sites, and so they actually basically had to get the district's approval to open this, and that was, a rigorous analysis, but on the basis of basically financial feasibility and things like that, that it's not an ill-advised business venture. So we went through those paces and had a number of public meetings on that, and ultimately they were approved. And my understanding is that they're still on track to open for next school year there.
Can I say one thing about the zoning map that you have? Besides the crazy zones, something that, like for Peavine, we go to 3 high schools. So, just so you know.
Adam, Darren Fleck for the record. Is the HUG remodel transformation, the old HUG remodel transformation, has that been put on hold? Awaiting?
No, actually. So what we call now the old HUG campus, Debbie Smith's Career and Technical Academy, is a full go. So that's going forward. It had some hiccups with regards to construction inflation, and we had to kind of pull back, recalibrate, and there's actually demolition occurring on that site. That's on pace for a August 2025 opening. That's going to be similar to AACT, a district-wide 9 through 12 CTE-focused magnet high school. Yep. A bit. Yeah, we modified some scope, we value engineered some elements, we modified our contracting and specifications really to try to. That's right. I mean, to be specific, there was a boardroom, a school board trustee boardroom that was included in the previous or in the original design for that. That has been eliminated. The project was put out to bid, and it came back, the bids came back just over 30% over what we had budgeted. There were a variety of reasons for that. It was a perfect storm of a sorts. So unfortunately, we weren't able to award the construction. That was spring of 2022. We weren't able to award the construction. We reevaluated all aspects of the project. We eliminated some scope. We made some less costly design choices in other areas, retained the total square footage and the academic programs of the original plan. We modified the construction specifications in ways that are more less risky to the contractor, so they're able to provide a more aggressive bid rather than having to price in a lot of unknowns. Things like that. We intend to, well, we've let the demolition contract already, and you'll see 50% of the buildings on that campus demolished before the end of 2022. We'll let the new construction contracts in the spring, and you'll see major activity throughout 2023 and into 2024, coming out of the ground for an August 2025 opening. Yeah, that's a full go. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Amy. So many frustrating elements of this part of the map that we just haven't been able to clean up, whether it's been COVID, a new charter school right in the middle of it, or this pending facilities modernization plan. You know, all these schools, Warner, Tolles, Elmcrest, Peavine, are all of that 1960 era nature. They all have relatively low enrollments. You can speak to the pros and cons of that, but
Well, they just, like for Peavine, they come, our students are neighborhood kids and then a group of kids that come from a really long ways away. So if they miss the bus or something, like it's really hard for them to get to school. You know, there's no easy way for them to get there because they really come a long ways. And so it's difficult. And then like the principal from Elmcrest is always telling me, you know, we jump right over the top of you and we need to get rezoned because those kids really should be coming to Peavine because there is that
She was at the
spot
meeting
up
yesterday.
there. Yeah.
She spoke for the area.
Yeah, and it is crazy. I mean, it was funny when he said, try and distinguish the lines, because it is a crazy zone. But we do go to Clayton, and but they do go, only a few go to Hug, but then they go to Reno and to McLean.
Yeah, so I do want to comment on the feeder schools. So one thing that came up yesterday, Canon, the group there actually did this really cool graphic on our feeder patterns, and there were a couple of outliers, and this area was one. And then we had one other North Valley's split situation. But they did complement the work of our committee, because they said most of the districts they work with do not have so many clear lines. And so we've done a really good job with that, but we know that this is an area that we haven't touched. And like Adam said, since the inception of this committee, it's been talked about. Polly can speak to that probably. We've talked about it, like, it's like, oh, we're going to do the Clayton area. We're going to do and then it's just gotten pushed back for various reasons. Not because the area is not important, but I have to say, with what the investment potential in the area is worth the wait, I think.
I totally agree with you, just so you know. I think that it's just been, for the community there, they've just been waiting and waiting and just thinking that it's coming. So I think for them to know that there's potential for what's coming is good for them to know. And so I've been trying to communicate that. And
I really believe that the investment that that the district could make in this community is 100% worth being a little patient, and it may take a bit, but I really do believe it will be worth it for modern facilities that give their students what they need. And I who knows, with the investment in the university area, this also could be a changing demographic in the area. We could see more people wanting to live in this area because we're investing in it. So it could turn out really great if we are patient and wait, I think.
thank you. Okay, just a couple more slides. This is past action. These are all to eliminate legacy split feeders, largely stemming from the opening of Desert Skies, actually relieving Trainer, creating opportunities, moving Lemelson over to Trainer, that type of stuff, eliminating some split feeders. These are the enrollments and utilization. You know, fairly well balanced, fairly well utilized, but small enrollment numbers, small schools. I mean, I don't know how many do you have? 325?
330.
Yeah, but and that's about on par. All of these schools, it's good, it's healthy.
I have no empty rooms, but yeah, we're tiny.
It's just a small school. Yep. So those are some of the efficiency opportunities that we're reimagining through the facility modernization study. So the purpose here is really just to communicate the intentionality with which we're addressing this area. We haven't forgotten about it. Nobody likes it, but there's logic behind our pacing. Couple of key takeaways I wanted to try to leave you with. The enrollment bubble and the general plateauing forecast for the district-wide enrollment is influencing our thinking and our strategy. I guess at the top, rezoning is a valuable tool, but not one to be used lightly. I really appreciate your comments about the urgency of any and all of these situations, but just trying to be very deliberate with when and how we use that action. We do have 2 new schools under construction. Obviously, Jaywood Raw is half done with construction. They had a big topping out ceremony about 2 weeks ago and are very much on pace to open next school year. W. Smith CTE High School, as I just described, also has broken ground and will see significant action on pace for 25-26 opening. This facility modernization program will try to address underutilization. We'll certainly take into consideration growth forecasts. And I genuinely, I'm struggling maybe with my words, but it's hard to overemphasize or to overstate the level of impact when you think about the communities that are served by these schools, having seen the impact that Desert Skies has made, that the new Proctor Hug High School has made on existing communities that these new school facilities have been placed within, what that means from an employee retention standpoint, a student engagement standpoint, and then even the ripple effect of pride that it has throughout the community from a small business or a private property standpoint. I've been making the rounds with elected officials across all jurisdictions, really trying to promote this for more than just an investment in school facilities, but a really transformative investment in our entire community. We all know about portables and movement of programs, but these are just some of the pieces of the puzzle that we try to juggle as staff before really bringing stuff forward to the committee, say, hey, I think we need to take action in the form of rezoning. So that's it. Again, appreciate you guys listening to me way too much tonight, but we're doing a lot of exciting things, and you guys, maybe this is a light year. Anticipate us coming back with as much as ever, just not in the form of new schools, but major reimagining of existing schools next year. And thank you for the input tonight on those other items, and we'll come back with some new information and try to square it up for action possibly next month.
All right, any questions, additional questions on this presentation? All right, everybody's ready to go. So we'll move on to item 3.01, public comment. Do we have any public comment?
We have public comment, but it's been forwarded to the
Okay.
members.
So everyone has their emails.
Yes.